What's up, everybody? Alex here. Welcome back to another SUDday, Funday, beer and vinyl weekend wrap, or whatever it's called, out of a plastic cup. Cheers, y'all. You don't get the full review. It's just a light beer, but it is interesting how sometimes it's just out of a plastic cup is just better. I don't know. Okay, so what's been up this weekend? Well, thank you for those who joined in. Last night we did a beer and vinyl low show. Me and Emma over at 8 Vinyl Low did a stream for about, 2.5 hours or so, and we're joined by Steve at All the World's a Stage, which was a great time, and a lot of people in the comments. So just thanks for being there, and yeah, we try to do that every maybe couple weeks or so, and so we're gonna kick it off. But let me get into some new stuff. Most of these I've listened to, some of I have not, all this different stuff. But basically, this is just stuff I've got this week and or yesterday, and I want to talk about them, and then I'll get into some of the other stuff I've been spinning this week or weekend. So there's that. So this was a new release from 2024 that I was really looking forward to. I know this artist is not for everyone, especially people who watch my channel. You know, it's like a lot of hard rock and classic rock, and I think this is maybe a polarizing figure, but this is someone I've just grown to really love and appreciate and respect, especially his writing, his music. To me, it's a very emotional experience, and so I was really looking forward to this getting released, and it was released, and that is the latest from Nick Cave and the Bad Seeds, Wild God. I've listened to this 2 times now, and I'm really enjoying it, right? I am not familiar. He's got like a gazillion records. I've heard a fair amount of the recent ones, you know, obviously Boatman's Call I Love, that was the first one I ever heard. Was it Skeleton Tree? Was it Ghost Teen? Some of the other ones, like he's dabbled in a lot of these different sort of genres. I mean, I think Ghost Teen or Skeleton Tree was almost like droney electronica kind of based stuff. This is back to like full band, but it's not obviously like punk like early Bad Seed stuff is. You know, I really dig this. Where is it going to fall in the Nick Cave canon or rest of the records this year? I don't know, but I'm really enjoying it, which means I'm going to be spinning it more. You know, again, he reminds me of like a Leonard Cohen in the sense of you can tell he is a writer first, and then you know where does it fit with the music? I mean, a writer and a poet and all that kind of stuff first. But there's some great stuff on here. A lot of people were saying this record almost has like a gospel-y type feel. Granted, it's called Wild God, and there's that spiritual component to it. But a lot of choir on here with the background voices. But Long Dark Night, which was one of the singles off this, I really love. Conversion, I love big time on side 2. As well as oh wow, how wonderful she is, also on side 2. So there's a lot of really great stuff on here, and I'm going to continue spinning this, but this is the latest from Nick Cave. This was a recent pickup on the complete other end of the spectrum. I've talked about this band a lot. They're maybe my favorite sort of heavy metal band of all time, and I'm slowly chipping away at finishing the discography. I still have a handful left, but this was one that I found at my local store. The price was good on it. These reissues are pretty expensive. They almost go for $50-$55 a piece, but this was on sale. Not even on sale. This was just priced at $35. But it's Dead Winter Dead from Sabotage. This was released in 1995. At this point in the game, you know, Sabotage has sort of moved away from that classic in-your-face 80s heavy metal sound into certainly more conceptual, progressive, symphonic metal, quote unquote. And it almost sounds like a different band. Now, what's cool about this release is that Dead Winter Dead is a concept album that's really, again, very progressive, very conceptual. But the concept of this record is what sort of laid the groundwork and the foundation for what would become the Trans-Siberian Orchestra literally a year later. So for those who know about Trans-Siberian Orchestra, the biggest Christmas hit ever. You hear it streamed every year a million times. Christmas Eve, Sarajevo, 12/24. It is actually on this record. So that is a composition that was written, composed by Sabotage, that Trans-Siberian Orchestra does. And the whole sort of concept of the Trans-Siberian Orchestra's first record, Christmas Eve and Other Stories, is actually taken from this concept. So, I'm a huge TSO fan, huge Sabotage fan. And so to have the record that sort of connects those acts together is just really cool. So I actually have not even spun this yet, but I'm really looking forward to it. But I was so happy to pick this up. I picked this up due to a recommendation from my boy Steve at All the World's a Stage. I mean, I trust his taste. I trust his recommendations. And I remember him saying that this was his favorite album of 1985 and potentially one of his favorite albums of all time. And it's a band I know nothing about. I had never listened to in my entire life. And that is, I believe, Scottish-Irish? I might be wrong there. The Waterboys. This is the C. To my limited understanding, this was their third release. After this is when Carl Wallinger would leave and form, World Party, and do some other stuff. And then the sound of the Waterboys would change and go a little bit more Celtic focused. I could be wrong there. I'm not completely up on these guys all the way. But, I trust Steve. And it was so funny. I was sitting there and I did spin this yesterday. I really enjoyed it. I'm going to need more time with it. I'm not in a place to give it like a review. I don't really do reviews anyway, but it was just so interesting to me that knowing Steve and him and I are into so much of the same stuff, hard rock, classic rock, progressive rock. This seems so un-Steve-like, and I told him that, and it still kind of does. I mean, it falls into this big sound or sort of trope that's used, I guess, to define some of the music at the time with stuff like this or big country. And some other bands, but it was just interesting. I mean, this is a tough, I think, genre for me to describe, but it definitely falls into, it sounds like 1985, but nothing at all. It doesn't have these electronic drums so much on it. The production on this, I think, is really strong. So, for those out there who know the Waterboys, really curious your thoughts on this. This is a completely new thing for me, but I'm really glad I picked it up, and Steve, cheers to you for making the recommendation. On that, and I'm looking forward to maybe what else is out there of them because I did enjoy it. Okay, so this is an interesting record here that I was so excited about when I saw it, and when I saw it in the store, it was a good price for what it was, and I was like, I gotta look this up, I gotta do the research, gotta do the thing. I admit that this is a very niche collectible thing. So way back in 1971, the band the Kinks were finally tasting a good amount of success in the United States because it was on the heels of Lola versus Power Man and the Money Go Round. But basically Lola, the big song, the big album, you had 8 Man on that album. They were finally successful and getting paid a little bit in the United States. So what do you do when you're on the heels of such a great record like that? How do you follow it up? Well, you have a manager that tells you that the next thing you should do as a band is a soundtrack. It turned out that was a terrible idea. So there is a record that actually connects Lola and Muswell Hillbillies, and that is a soundtrack album, Percy. Now, this was never released actually in the United States at all. It was heavily imported because of that reason, but this was the Kinks record that was never released in the US at all. It sort of got one pressing, quote unquote, several years ago for Record Store Day, but that was a picture disc. And so I didn't want to just have it just for the picture disc. Everything I had heard about this record was that it was terrible. The band hates it, all this different stuff. And so for me, I was like, dang, but I love the Kinks. I got all the Kinks stuff. This is the one I'm missing because it was never released here, and I want them to be originals. And so when I saw this, did a little bit of the research. The originals have a textured cover. The second pressings, I think, had a more laminated cover. And this is an original UK on Pi. And I just, it was just the coolest to have this. It filled the hole. I had been searching for this for so long. Now, how is the record? It's so interesting because I'm not going to say it's a bad record. It's a soundtrack, right? So it's just a little bit different of how it's kind of put together. I will say, side one kicks off with the single from the record, which is God's Children. I think that's a wonderful, beautiful song. The Way Love Used to Be, I think that's also a beautiful song. I mean, I think that is Ray Davis just doing great Ray Davis type stuff. I always enjoyed them doing their sort of conceptual stuff in that way. But then you have this sort of instrumental bluesy version of Lola, which is bizarre. You got some other kind of odd instrumental stuff on here. Again, it's a soundtrack. It's not a real album in that way. And so, is it as bad as people have claimed it is? Not for me. I still got some enjoyment out of it. I still do think there's some great stuff on here. But most importantly, the collector in me just couldn't be any happier that I was able to grab this and at a great price too. It's funny because people who watch in the UK, you probably see this all the time. But here in the States, just never. So yeah, just really just happy to have that. Shout out to both Steve again and my girl Emma, 8 Vinyl Low, because I know this is a cat that they are both hugely fond of. I'm a big fan too, but I probably had, I think, maybe 4 or 5 records of his, but this I was really looking forward and am looking forward to diving into. I have not listened yet, but I'm feeling that this is going to be a good live record tonight maybe, or next weekend. And that is Rory Gallagher, or Gallagher, depending on who you are and where you're coming from, Irish Tour 1974. So the great Northern Ireland Irish guitarist who has influenced so many, died way too young like so many other people. Great double live record. This was actually worth a little bit more than I thought it was. I mean, it's not like a crazy expensive record. There is obviously some ring wear on here. Sleeve has seen some better days, but all in all, the records are really clean, and this came out to about $10. So really happy with this. Big fan of Roy Gallagher, or Gallagher. It's kind of an inside joke. I've just heard it pronounced different ways. So people getting a fight in the comments. I want the VC drama right now to be about how to pronounce Gallagher. Yeah, really excited for that. If you're familiar with that album, let me know your thoughts. And obviously, let me know your thoughts with the pronunciation for Rory as well. Okay, so here's a very common live record. I just never owned it. I'm a big fan of this artist. I see this all the time, but I was happy that it contained all 5 LPs and it contained the booklet, which is really important. And that, believe it or not, is the first official live album release from Bruce Springsteen, the E Street Band. This is live 1975, 1985. It's so funny. I just saw Rob over at Northern Revolutions post about this. He just picked this up too. And so, yeah, it's crazy that, you know, his first sort of official live record came out, 13, 14 years afterwards. And obviously, you know, Bruce has had a hell of a career and has gone through so many different eras, right? What's cool about this, it's 5 LPs, so it contains everything. Yeah, it's a little bit 80s heavy just because that's what he was touring, or that's what was going on at the time of release. And so it is a little bit Born in the USA heavy, which is not typically what I enjoy in my Bruce Springsteen. I stick to those first like 6 records. But there's so much on here. I got through, I think, 2 discs of this. And I still got to get through the other 3 because it's a bit of a beast. But man, I just love opening up with Thunder Road, just that piano version. I love that so much. Thunder Road is one of my favorite songs of all time. And so much of the other great classics are on here as well. So yeah, again, a cool pickup. It was priced well. And then for me, most importantly, it has the booklet, and you know, when you're looking at these types of like old school box sets, to have the booklet and everything in great shape, that's important for me. So yeah, I was pretty pumped about that, and that's what took up one of the live nights for me. Now, another live night, and this is actually going to kick off kind of a cool thing for my Canadian pals up there. These next 3 artists are all badass Canadian guitarists that I don't hear enough people talking about ever. And so Canada, this is for you. No, it's no Kim Mitchell. No, it's no Alex Lifeson, but it works. You'll see what I'm getting at here. So first off, this was one of the live albums from Friday or Saturday that I was listening to. I didn't have a ton of time, so I just went with a single. And what a single one this is. This is the Pat Travers Band live Go For What You Know. I believe this came out in 1979. Pat Travers, I mean, for Canadian, he's from Toronto, an amazing, badass, hard rock, bluesy guitarist, but his band was on fire at this point, with Pat Thrall also playing guitar, and of course the great Tommy Aldridge on drums, who would just in a few years end up joining up with Ozzy's team. He was coming from Black Oak, Arkansas. He would end up being on Slip of the Tongue for Whitesnake in '89. But man, the band's on fire, and this is just good old-fashioned Friday, Saturday party hard rock and roll. I mean, that's the best way to describe it, right? Like, it is no bells and whistles. It is just ripping guitar, great riffs, great jams, chugging beers, whatever that is for you. But absolutely love this. And so, I was like, oh, Pat Travers, great Canadian guitar player. Well, here's another great Canadian guitar player. Most people know this guy from his first album because he had a huge hit with the song Fantasy. This is actually his second album, and as subject, Alo Nova. Canadian guitarist, songwriter out of Montreal, or at least out of Quebec. And where does this fall? So this came out in 1983. Again, a lot of people know Fantasy. It kind of became like a one-hit wonder. This is the second album. This falls into like this mix between like guitar rock and like AOR. I mean, it's very 80s sounding, big harmonies, big cheese. I mean, this record is full of cheese, but lucky for him and people like me, I love the cheese. So yeah, I mean, what was the song on here that I absolutely love? Always Be Mine, I think. It's just so cheesy. It's so AOR. It falls right in there. But it has like this guitar-centric vibe to it. He's ripping on here. He is shredding on here. What an amazing guitarist Alo Nova is. And so, yeah. This was a dollar pickup. Actually, both of these were both... Actually, all three of these that I'm showing were all dollar pickups. So, yeah, pumped on that. And here's the last one. This might be my favorite Canadian guitarist of all time. Yes, even above Alex Lifeson, and I love Rush to death. They're one of my favorite bands of all time. But I think just as a pure guitarist out there, to me, it doesn't get any better than Frank Marino, Mahogany Rush. This is What's Next, came out in 1980. This is sort of a little bit later-ish in their career. Those first several Mahogany Rush albums, at least for people here in the States, they're common, but some of them go for like a good penny. I mean, I'm sure you find them all the time up there in Canada. I love Frank Marino. And I shared the story a couple years ago. I had tickets to see him here in Columbus, and then he had to cancel the show just a few weeks ahead of time for some major medical issues, and then announced retirement. So no idea what's going on. Hope he's okay. Who knows if he'll ever come out of retirement or what kind of health issues those were. But man, if you don't know Frank Marino and you're a guitar guy or guitar girl, whatever, check him out. It is bluesy, but it is hard rock. It is in your face. It is like shoe-redding. Great stuff. Some people compare him to Hendrix. I don't think it's there as much. To me, his voice actually sounds more like Jimmy than his guitar playing. Jimmy was an innovator, and he did all these things first. Frank is a technician, man. This guy is out there absolutely ripping in the best of ways. And man, I just cannot say enough about Frank Marino and Mahogany Rush. Just an amazing man. And last but not least, let's go to San Francisco for, you talk about the psychedelic bands of San Francisco, right? You talk about Grateful Dead, you talk about Jefferson Airplane, you talk about Moby Grape, you talk about Country Joe and the Fish. All of those artists had debut albums kind of in that 65, 66, 67 sort of area. This was a band that was a little bit more jazz influenced, a little bit more classically influenced, and that's why I like them a ton. But their debut was not until 1968, and that's the debut from Quicksilver Messenger Service. Look at this is Seen Better Days, some water damage there. This was a dollar holler record. The record itself is in really, really great condition. It's actually a 71 reissue on that green, kind of nuclear green Capitol label. The originals would have been on that rainbow Capitol from 68. I mean, again, they fall into that sort of psychedelic thing, but to me, it's almost more musical, again, because they have that sort of jazzy / classical background a little bit. In fact, on this record here with the song Gold and Silver, the backbeat of it, basically what they're sort of basing that whole song off of, is Take 5 from Dave Brubeck's Time Out. So Take 5 is called Take 5 because it's like this jazz standard in 5, 1 2 3 1 2 1 2 3 1 2. So there's that, and obviously they're kicking off. They also got the big epic 12 minutes, The Fool, I believe, on side B as well. But yeah, John Cipollina and Gary Duncan, those cats were doing some dueling guitar stuff. Really cool band, really great stuff as well. So yeah, check out Quicksilver Messenger Service if you have not already. And there we go. That's what we get. We're under 20 minutes. Not a bad time. Let's end the video as any good video should on beer and vinyl with a little bit of a chug. Cheers, everybody. See you on the next one. Have a good week, y'all. Bye.